the institutions have failed to deliver a certain quality of conversation, and they've limited conversation. And we don't need those institutions anymore because we have this novel technology, and there's all these conversations that were already happening. And that IDW thing was kind of like, let's take this stuff a little bit mainstream. Things are getting a little bit more mainstream, or it's already mainstreaming. If you look at Rogan compared to CNN, like who's more mainstream? I mean, by the numbers, right? So maybe it's just the reality of thing. But the promise was that we're going to have all these conversations and steelman each other and have good faith argument. I can hear those stupid phrases in my head. I still use them somehow, but they're just cringy and dated at this point. All failed at a certain point because those liberal ideals of infinite rationalization don't cover certain things for certain people. And there's
Like
different
what?
fractures. Do we trust our, like, the split between Sam Harris and Bret Weinstein came down to trusting the expert institutions around the novel coronavirus in 2019, 2020, and then the novel medical intervention that was came up in 2021. Bret and Sam took different ways, and Sam shut down that conversation pretty baldly and called Bret a bunch of names and stuff like that because we can't go there. October 7th was another testing point. 2020 was another testing point. I think we were all I think the people loosely associated with the IDW were all kind of formed basically in this post DEI bubble. They were all kind of unified around like this DEI stuff is shit. I think that was what they were co-belligerents on, to steal a phrase from Aaron McIntyre. They were all agreed on that, but then all these other things keep on happening that split them and split them and split them. And then they all went in different directions with regard to the work that they were doing. And then you have like second tier, third tier, fourth tier people underneath them doing a lot of the work, tying up things that they find interesting, like Paul Vanderklay would be engaged in the more meaning crisis spiritual domain. And so there are things from Sam Harris and Bret Weinstein and these other people that he would interact with, but he's doing his own project mapping this whole thing. And then he's connected to John Vervaeke, who's not IDW at all. He's still in the institution, but he's pushing out this certain content. I'm probably connected to Bret Weinstein, but I went in a completely different direction because I'm not like I'm an interviewer basically, so I just started mapping out these other things and going way off the reservation. I'm sure from his point of view, talking to this dissident right people, I know that those guys just don't truck. They actually are inimical to each other, or like they're at odds with each other. Kisin called it out. Like there is the IDW set, which I think Kisin would be appropriately put next to, are very much opposed to the DR, and it has something to do with the DR's closeness to anti-Semitic sentiment. And a lot of the people, the IDW people, are either Jewish explicitly or Jewish sympathizers, want to have nothing to do with that. And the DR people are either agnostic to that or openly flirting with that or just okay with that, or you just see a lot of it there. And I don't know what that's about, but that's a really interesting point of view because now the left, the crazy left, is doing that too with the whole Palestine versus Israel thing. So I can see from the IDW point of view, like these both people are woke, which is ultimately code for anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish specifically. And what does that mean? And why is that there? What is the phenomena of anti-Semitism? Am I breaking up?
No.
Yeah. And that conversation is so freaking fraught and sensitive that somebody like me is like, oh, I don't even know if I can have this conversation, but I can talk to a bunch of Jews about it. You know, that's about as far as I can go because if I am seen as construed as actually anti-Semitic or repeating anti-Semitic talking points, and doesn't that sound a lot like how the woke police discourse? Like we can't talk about this white coated or dog whistles and stuff like that. This whole policing of discourse, like I cannot go over there, and that makes me want to go over there just to see what's going on over there. Express questions so that, well, you can't really express those questions, and at the same time, really respect that these things are going to trigger people rightly because of historical factors. Rightly,
Man, that's a really great articulation of kind of the space, like because it seems like it can just all get lumped into one to the left right thing, but you kind of like parsed out, at least parsed out the right to a degree, and Because I think the idea of progressive has a pretty like, all encompassing. It's easy to kind of see that in a way, but like I guess.
Well, from the point of view of the right, a low resolution take from the right is that the classical liberals are just basically progressives. And they would even say the conservatives are basically progressives from 20 years ago, and the classical liberals are progressives from 10 years ago, and the progressives are progressives now. And I think that they rightly see that there's a certain kind of progression or Whig history, not in history itself, but in the progression of these ideas. And you're like, well, yeah. And then you wonder about that analysis, and you can say, well, isn't this just kind of the Christian project that's continually going along in some certain progressive direction? Or is it the Protestant project? Not necessarily Christian. And then there's a whole theological conceptualization of this, a historical theological conceptualization of this. If you start studying church history, if you go to Dominion, Tom Holland's work and stuff, and you try to see this in the larger context, then you can try to see what the right's doing, or what the dissident right is doing. Are they really yokels from another time? Or are they really fascists from another time? And what I talk to, I could ask anybody this, and they would all answer me in a certain way. Even the most rightest of right people, I would say, how far would you go back in history to be considered left? And I'm sure that they would do that. Even the people who believe in medieval conceptualization, I'd probably be left wing concerning, I don't know, heliocentrism, or something like that. So there is some sort of leftishness that we all land on this perspective. But I think that might even be a wrong. You're having an idea. Just one more thing. I think that might even be an ineffectual way of looking at it when you think of just societal decadence and decay. And if you say, okay, well, where was society stable, and which people are fighting for the stablest form of society? And you just kind of stop doing left and right and historical, like how far back would you go? And you say, well, you just start looking at the health of the nation and kind of look at it as a body, like as a doctor looking at a body, or a physician trying to say, okay, well, the body's going to behave in certain ways, and it's behaving wrongly.
That's a really good perspective. Is when was society most stable or something, and what were the I think it's interesting. Yeah. Well, and we're obviously biased in America towards when it was most stable, during our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Could be perceived
when was that for
stable.
You? What TV shows were playing when society was most stable?
Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.